All right, coming up, the big Biden reset coming to a television near you. The commander-in-chief gearing up for a State of the Union address tonight, tweeting out this image of him reviewing his notes, which appear to be short and choppy sentences, 2 at a time and in big, bold font. But hey, you should see our notes. The president aiming to rehab his image as someone who is fit for the highest office in the land and not an elderly man with a poor memory, as written in a recent special counsel report. So, with multiple crises at home and abroad, the president has a lot of convincing to do, especially with a public who has lost faith in his ability to handle it all. Only 20% of Americans say that they are extremely or very confident when it comes to his mental capacity for the presidency. This could be why he's consulting his famous friends who played presidents in Hollywood movies for advice on what people want to hear.
Some of you might know what a big speech like I have to do is coming up State of the Union. Any advice you have for me in delivering my speech?
Well, sir, in my capacity as president, all I had to deal with was a meteor.
There's no crying in politics.
Well, what I hope is my politics doesn't make anybody else cry.
Don't forget to save a dance for the First Lady in the East Room.
The president's spin team also out in full force, hyping him up.
He's done more in the last 3 years, Willie, than most presidents have been able to do in their in their 2 terms.
We're going to see the president in fighting form, talking about what he's accomplished for the American people.
Oh, I think you'll see a lot of energy from the president. That's the kind of energy you saw last year. That's the kind of energy I see every day when I'm working with the president.
How big of a risk is it if he were to stumble tonight?
Well, look, I think, there's always in these moments a desire to focus on the distractions du jour. The president is focused on one thing, and that's communicating clearly his vision for the country to the American people.
And the mainstream media, they're always good for a pep talk. The New York Times out with this headline, and beefed up image of the president calling for Dark Brandon in the House, and others are also cheering him on.
F you if you can't handle the truth. This version of Biden, intellectually, analytically, is the best Biden ever. Not a close second, and I've known him for years.
You know, Biden trips, he stutters, but he gets things done, and he's rational, even if he makes a mistake.
Greg Gutfeld, that was kind of a lot to take. What do you think about all that?
Watching the media try to force feed Dark Brandon on the public is hilarious. Dark Brandon is what they call his laundry basket. By the way, how can you call this a reset? It's a little late in the game for that. You can't roll back the odometer, on this lemon. You can't reboot a Commodore 64. I mean, you could unplug him and then plug him back in, but then you risk losing everything. I think when a person says repeatedly that he has a lot of energy, that means he doesn't have any energy at all. That's a tell. Biden is like an old iPhone that never gets over 10%. When he's charged, there's no signal. When there's a signal, there's no charge. And it's great to watch the media pretend that it's the opposite. There's this palpable sense of nervousness leading up to this. It reminds me of the hour when I was a kid, the hours leading up to an Evel Knievel jump. Will he make it? Will he survive? Will he crash and burn? The only difference is Evel Knievel was taking a deliberate and calculated risk. They're just hoping Joe Biden, crosses the floor. As for getting advice from the TV presidents, are we sure that Joe knew that those weren't real presidents? But they do have a lot in common. They take direction from other people really, really well. The bottom line is the Dems are just hoping they get him off the lot. He's like a used car. They need to get him out there and just not fall on his face. And then you can bet that the media is going to say it's a raving success.
And 0% loan for your financing. Jesse, I kind of love the idea that Joe Biden, who apparently is the most successful president ever in the history of the world, if you listen to the White House, taking advice from the fake president from Scandal.
That's Joe. He needs these highly produced, well-choreographed, celebrity-laden productions to generate the buzz he's not able to generate naturally. He's limp. And so they bring in A-listers who are past their prime, no offense, Michael Douglas, I love you, to then generate any sort of action on the internet. And that's fine. They have to do what they have to do. But we all know what this is. It's window dressing. There is no reset. He's 80 years old. We've known him his whole life. This is his third year. Reset? You're banking on Joe Biden, the worst orator in the history of presidential politics, to come out with this magical moment in front of millions of people and then reset the course of the trajectory of his presidency? Joe Biden, he can't talk. And he has bad speechwriters. And even worse, Dana, he has bad policies. Nothing he's done has helped the American people, and nothing he's said about what he's done has helped. So you're telling me tonight they're going to concoct this brilliant turn of phrase, and the American people are going to say, aha, yes, you're right, Biden. Everything is good. You have helped me. It's impossible. And you even go back, Dana, to all of the amazing speeches the media says that Joe Biden has delivered, where it's the Dark Brandon, the one at Union Square, all of these major, viciously partisan, wicked speeches. Have they helped his approval rating? No. Have they changed the way the American people think about his policies? No. He's never shown any ability to give a big speech and change at all the direction of his campaign. So you can't rely on this. I'd like to hear what his vision is for a second term. He was asked about what his vision was on a late night show. He couldn't even articulate it. He said his vision was the same vision they had in the 2020 campaign, which was about COVID. So I don't know what he's going to say tonight. I know the Democrats are nervous. I'm like Greg. He's putting the evil in Evel Knievel.
Judge, I think that you'll hear a lot of rosy commentary about jobs and the economy, to Jesse's point about making this idea that 72% of the country thinks it's on the wrong track. And he will try to say, but actually, look, jobs are good and the economy is good and everything's getting better. And that, I don't know if that can actually meet the moment of where people are tonight.
Well, I think that he's going to try to convince us that things are better, obviously, than what most Americans think. And the fact that his approval rating is in the 30s and the fact that 70% of Americans don't think the man should run again. There's nothing that he's going to say tonight that's going to change anything. The truth is that, I feel badly for the Democrats tomorrow morning, who are going to have to defend whatever speech he's giving tonight and saying it was great, it was wonderful. And by the way, I don't expect him to stutter, because I've never really heard him stutter in the last few years. I've heard a lot of mumbling, seen a lot of tripping. But, I think Americans have to ask themselves, what is it about tonight that makes things so special? Why is the State of the Union that one speech that we all get together and listen to because, it's going to give us hope for the next year? And I don't know if there's anything he can say. And, they're going to talk about the people who are in the audience tonight. I'll tell you who's not going to be in the audience tonight. Laken Riley is not going to be in the audience tonight. The state trooper who was killed by an illegal yesterday is not going to be in the audience tonight. The 13 soldiers in that open-air airport in Afghanistan won't be. The families of thousands of Americans who died from his open border disaster, who died from fentanyl. And so he's going to try to paint this rosy picture and, say the economy is great. Well, here's the bottom line. The truth is that food and gas prices aren't even included in inflation. So when they try to argue the economy is great, Americans are going to say, wait a minute, this is all I can afford this week. And there's nothing that he's going to be able to say to change it, unless, as Jesse says, it's one of those dark speeches where, he's got people around him saying how horrible the MAGA people are. Although, we understand he's not going to say the name Trump, and then he changed his mind and he is going to say the name Trump. I mean, who knows what's going to happen there? But in the end, I think it's going to be blaming the Republicans for all things bad and not taking responsibility for the state of America today.
A lot of the coverage, Harold, leading up to this has been about some of the smaller issues. And I know the White House thinks that junk fees is a good one. And maybe it is. Who knows? I don't know. I've not sat in on the focus groups. But some of the bigger issues, it doesn't sound like the White House is really going to tackle those as much. And also, I would like to say, we would like to have you back around the table, but right now we're not around a table. Before you can say it.
It's good to be in a box with everybody. Winning, I got a little different opinion about it. I'm going to watch his speech. I don't disagree with a lot of the kind of tone and the thinking that he's going to have to say more than not to get people to understand that he deserves 4 more years. I'd say 3 things quickly. 1, the re-election campaign starts tonight for the president. 2, this is one of the 2 biggest audiences the president will have between now and the election. The second being when he accepts the Democratic nomination in Chicago when the party gives him that. All the networks will cover like they're doing it tonight. He has, I think, a real responsibility and obligation tonight to be more cheerful than contentious, to be more optimistic than ominous. I would agree with the judge. The dark stuff I don't think Americans want to see because they're dealing with so many challenges in their day-to-day lives. I think he's going to draw contrast between his accomplishments and values, between he and President Trump. And as Jesse, I think, aptly said and rightly said, what does another 4 years look like if the country gives President Biden that 4 years that he's going to begin asking for in the most overt and open of ways this evening? I do expect him, as Dana, you've said over the last few days, I think he will talk about some contrast with what he wants from Congress around border security and Ukraine funding and even funding for Israel. We saw today that the White House announced that they're going to build a port that will help deliver aid better and supplies better.
Yeah, that seems to not be going over very well, though, Harold.
Well, I think when you think about what happened in Michigan and Pennsylvania and some of what Democrats trying to consolidate the base, I think the president believes that is the right thing. And I think he may even believe from a humanitarian standpoint it's the right thing to do. But I do hope if he does criticize Republicans for not being with him on the board and other things, I hope he shares what he's willing to compromise on, what he's willing to give, and what he's willing to sign. I know there may be some reservations around the table about this may be too late on the border, maybe too late on Ukraine, maybe too late on crime. But I'm just a different thinker about this. I don't care if you were my biggest opponent 9 days out of 10. If you can come around on the 10th day, I want you there. And I'm hopeful the president, again, will be cheerful about it tonight and be optimistic as he shares his vision for the country.
I can't imagine like the leader of Hamas who's hiding in the tunnels thinking, wow, this is amazing. Just 5 months ago, we went and murdered a bunch of people, raped a bunch of women, have all these people hostages, including Americans, and we're going to get a port out of the State of the Union. Fabulous.
Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.